Thanks, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Mark Glogly from Three Karens. It is fun to be here today with hi Patty, such a great group of people. You know, Three Karens is excited to work with our colleagues at Allied Talent Partners to co-host this event with Rockefeller, with the Foundation Catalytic Capital, with Africa 50, and with the African Climate Foundation. And you'll hear from each of those groups today. Thank you for Acha. Is he here? Where's Acha? Thank you for doing this. Acha is the chair of McKinsey Africa and is going to be our panel moderator for both panels. Many of you know Mimi Alameo. Mimi she was supposed to do this introduction. I was not. So if it's going not so well, talk to Mimi. She is at a board meeting for the One Foundation now, and so she's not able to be here. But Mimi's been an essential colleague of all of us at Three Karens around talent in Africa, and which is a passion of hers and a passion of all of ours. Today we're going to hear about innovative models. Innovative models in general are essential to economic vitality. You need to be able to change things and move around and fix and go faster. We all know that. So we're going to hear about innovation in talent, in catalytic capital, in capacity building, and in partnerships. Those are the four basic topics for this morning. And behind these efforts is a real desire for greater economic vitality and to improve people's lives. This will be an interactive conversation. There are a lot of people out here who are not shy, so jump right in, and they're very knowledgeable. With whatever questions you have, Acha will be moving in that direction with each of these panels. And if you have an idea of what you want to do to innovate in Africa or around this topic, then we're open to buy. We want to understand what the best idea is. You know, Lisbeth and I met about 3 years ago, and the idea at that time, for example, was around training in Africa. But we at Three Karens thought, we don't know very much about that, but we know something about create a marketplace for talent. So we shifted to that, and that's one of the initiatives that we're talking about today, Allied Talent Partners. But if you have something that you think is missing, that's an innovation that you really want to push on, and there's a real story behind it, we're open to buy. Prior to the first panel, we'll see a short video, and with that, thank you very much and have a good morning.
The next decade will be transformational. A significant and rapid scale-up of infrastructure and human capital is required to meet growing energy demands while achieving a sustainable emissions pathway and driving inclusive, sustainable development in Africa. The way we work is changing. Independent professionals are now one of the fastest growing segments of the global workforce, and Africa is no exception. New pathways and models have emerged to access and deploy this talent, providing increasing levels of agility and capacity to organizations across the world. Backed by the Three Karens Group, ATP operates as a dynamic marketplace, connecting independent professionals on one side and organizations driving sustainability and inclusive growth on the other. We work with a diverse pool of professionals. Where expertise is needed, ATP sources it rapidly and locally first.
Presently, I'm engaged in an exciting project with a major advisory group aimed at unlocking capital for one of Africa's high-growth sectors. I stepped in as a critical resource on an urgent project need, was prepped, interviewed, contracted, and onboarded within a single week. As consultants, one of our biggest hurdles is positioning our personal brand for credible projects. ATP's model enables fast access to exciting projects, supports candidates to prep for client interviews, and manages the administrative aspects of contracting and billing, which eliminates the risk of non-payment.
I'm a consultant with Allied Talent Partner. I offer over 20 years of experience working on both the public and the private side for organizations like IFC, private equity fund, and the government. Being a consultant with Allied Talent Partner works very well for me as it allows me to work on a wide variety of assignments and client.
ATP partners with organizations across the public, private, and social sectors, including development finance institutions and investors, infrastructure developers, consulting firms, NGOs, governments, and corporations, matching them with the right expertise precisely when they need it.
That we normally get from investors and project developers is investors say, we've seen a lot of projects brought in front of us, but they're not good enough for us to fund. And on the other hand, the projects will say, or the developers will say, we have projects, they're ready, but what we don't have is the financing. So there's always a gap between the two, the financing and the implementation. And what we are trying to do as this consortium of the Global Energy Alliance, GEA, World Bank, TDB, and ATP is to try and bridge that gap. So as TDB is looking at the pipeline that has been presented to it by the companies, then ATP is bringing on experts who help TDB to evaluate the opportunity, to help with the due diligence, to help with structuring the project in legal terms, technical, financial, as well as looking at carbon finance. And that brings the developers and the investor in this, in these circumstances, TDB, much closer.
The project that ESCOM is embarking on aims at determining the carbon dioxide emission factor that is associated with every unit of electricity that is generated. So the reason we contact the ATP is that they should help to determine the carbon dioxide emission factor for the country, and they did help us quite a lot in offering us the expertise, the technical know-how on how to go about calculating this grid emission factor for the country. This has enabled us, or has created an opportunity for stakeholders in the energy sector in Malawi to start looking at the opportunities that are there in carbon credits trading.
I'm always really excited when I reach out to the ATP team because they're able to help with specialist staffing requests or surge support. And they turn the requests around really quickly. 2 to 3 days, they're able to provide really high quality candidates that can deliver on the workflow. It's been a pleasure working with ATP.
We are a talent utility, unlocking human capital to power Africa's energy access and sustainable development ambitions. Allied Talent Partners, strengthening local capacity and fueling economic vitality.
All right, yes, you can clap. Whatever it is, like, can we clap or not? There we go. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Achaleke. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey. But like many people here, and like Mark was saying, I'm incredibly passionate about talent as well. So I was head of McKinsey. I helped found the African Leadership Academy, the African Leadership University, ALX, where we're really trying to groom the next generation of African talent. So when Mark and the team reached out, it was very easy for me to say yes, very happy to come and moderate this discussion. And we talked about, I think, the big focus on energy transition. But when we talk about energy transition, we know how important it is on the continent. But the challenge is every time we talk about it, and we've had many conversations already in the past 2 days here, is very much about financing, is very much about project execution, project preparation. There's a critical element that's always missing, which is talent. And I'm very excited that that's what we'll talk about here today. In addition to hearing from the partners in terms of collaboration and things like that, but talent is the key point we're going to discuss. And we'll do it in 2 parts. So I'll have a session first with the ATP team, so we can better understand the model, how it's working, what the aspirations are, what some of the challenges are. And then we'll have some of the partners come and share their perspective with us. So on that note, let me invite Sarah McNeely, who's the managing director of ATP. And before that, she was with Scaling Business Talent Group until it was acquired by Hydrix and Struggles. All right. So please join me. And then my colleague, Zandi, well, my colleague. She used to be my colleague, Zandi. And I still feel like she's my colleague. She is the chief of staff and head of strategy at ATP, and used to be at McKinsey. And I think, she did a lot of work with clients, but what I think is more relevant here is she helped launch a program we put out called McKinsey Forward, where we really helped groom the next generation of leaders. So we've trained about 200,000 young leaders across 60+ countries on future-ready skills, on work-ready skills. And Zandi was at the core of leading that. So welcome. All right, let me sit down. And we'll just have a discussion, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So Sarah, maybe let's start with you. This whole independent workforce topic globally, it's taking off, right? And it's taking off in Africa as well. Why is that? Right? And I was reflecting on that topic, and I was like, wow, maybe I should do what Zandi did and leave McKinsey and come and join you all. So tell me, why should I do that?
Very welcome. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Such a pleasure to talk with you all about this topic. So I'm going to take it back actually 10 to 15 years ago. I joined a small startup in Los Angeles called Business Talent Group. And Business Talent Group had the hypothesis that the gig economy, so Uber drivers, was going to extend to professional workers. And I think we were right. Professional workers that are migrating or opting out of the traditional workforce and going to the independent the freelance economy is one of the fastest growing segments of the workforce today. And we have seen it over the last, the tens of hundreds of thousands of workers that are working in this way. So who are these people? Typically, at least in the professional workforce, they have between 10 and 30 years of experience. They have solid skill sets in specific areas, whether it's financial modeling, fund management, battery storage expertise, or program management, project developers. Sort of they run the gamut. HR specialists, Marcom specialists, anything and everything you can find in this sort of workforce. They are traditionally what I would say strategic doers. They are not only, they are individuals that can drive a project, that can sit at a table with key stakeholders and manage those stakeholders, but they also enjoy doing the work. And I think that's one of the reasons that they sort of opted out of the traditional workforce is as you grow in a traditional workforce, you start to manage people. These are people that enjoy doing the work, right? They enjoy doing the Excel models, writing the PowerPoints, doing the field research, getting their hands dirty. That was my experience at BTG prior to ATP, and it's my experience now at ATP. So how is ATP leveraging them? We're essentially placing an infrastructure across this market. So ATP is with technology and staff. We have 10 staff on the continent. We are identifying who these resources are and where they are. So these would be resources that are independent contractors, have skill sets that are relevant to energy transition and sustainable development, and are either on the continent or in the diaspora, in many cases in Europe, with heavy experience in Africa. So we're identifying them all, we're curating and cataloging them. We have a rich taxonomy to sort of identify what skill sets they have, what languages, what country they have experience in, and then we're creating sort of tech-enabled processes to be able to match these skill sets with work that we're helping our clients identify. I think the bottom line of what we're doing is sort of bringing additionality to the ecosystem. By curating and cataloging all of these workers and making them available for work on the continent, we are supercharging the labor force to be able to do this work.
And how do you identify them? Is it more of a push as you go look for them, or they come to you?
I think it's actually a bit of both. We have 6,000 talent on our platform today. That has largely been by us going out and finding them. The more and more, as our reputation grows, we are seeing talent come to us, being referred to us. And so I do believe we're just scratching the surface of that.
Absolutely. So Sandy, let's then talk a bit about that, because we always say, Africa has a talent problem, right? But in some cases, it's the talent is there, but it's about how to unlock it, right? So what do you guys do at ATP to unlock that talent?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I want to preface it by saying that, as innovations come up, as new ways of working, new models of delivery come up, we'll always need new skills, right? And so the human capital challenge or opportunity it will always need to be handled in a multi-pronged way, right? We'll need higher education, we'll need skills and training, we'll need capability building and upskilling in the workplace. But at least what we are seeing from ATP is that sometimes it's not a scarcity challenge, it's a mobilization challenge, right? And there are specific barriers that you need to overcome in order to do that. And we're focusing on a couple of them, and Sarah touched some of these. And I think primarily what we see is the three barriers to sort of unlocking this talent that we know is there on the continent. First is around, visibility, which Sarah mentioned, we're curating, we're cataloging. The other is fragmentation, right? So we talk a lot about continental brain drain. And there's this phrase that I've recently come up with, which I really like. I don't know if I did, but what we want to move to is more of a continental brain trust, right? Where I can take a Kenyan engineer to go support an organization in Nigeria, and I can do so very quickly. That's what we're trying to do in ATP. Within a couple of weeks, mobilize that talent so we can cross the geographical barriers, right? Addressing the fragmentation. And then the last challenge is around the silos. And when I speak about silos, it's mostly the sort of the sectoral thinking that we have today and the more rigid sort of job descriptions, whereas we're finding more and more that there are skills that are cross-sector relevant. I think a good example is what we're doing with the Mission 300 expert roster, where yes, we're looking for energy policy, we're also looking for distributed renewable energy experts, but we're also looking for digital talent. We're also looking for project managers, right? Because we recognize that there are skills that are transferable across sectors. And that's what a model like ATP helps unlock. And to attest to the fact that the talent is definitely there on the continent, I mean, we've just been operational for a little over 2 years, and we've been able to amass over 6,000 of these professionals on our talent base. We've matched talent for over 200 projects, and more than 80% of those are African nationals, right? With the remainder being diaspora or global talent that has the expertise. So all in all, we believe that the talent is there. We just need to move to one more continental brain trust, but ultimately create pathways to unlock and mobilize them.
Got you. So if the talent is there, then you need clients, right, who are going to want to use this talent. And in some cases, I would argue clients potentially waiting for the perfect, permanent hire versus an independent workforce. So how do you convince clients that this is the path they should follow? When is it a good path for them? And by the way, when is it not a good path for them?
Thank you. I think traditionally we've hired resources full-time, and I think full-time is always a good idea, and it will continue to be the lion's share of how we get work done. I think what we're saying is, given the trend in the workforce, given the fact that so many professionals are moving to this independent way of working, organizations need to figure out how to embed independence in their human capital strategy. Maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 20% of how the work gets done. I don't know, but I know that given the fact that the best and brightest can work this way and want to work this way, we need to figure out how to bring them in. When we talk to clients, we typically talk about 3 use cases. Niche expertise, meaning I just need somebody who knows how to do a specific technical thing for a short period of time, but I don't need someone on a full-time basis. That, is quite compelling to clients. Surge capacity, especially on the continent. I have so much to do. I don't have enough people. I don't really want to hire another full-time person. I might not have budget to do. I might only need them for 12 months or 6 months or 6 days. But let me carve out a specific piece of work that I can give to an independent to get that done. And then finally, and what I think is really interesting is the interim. So interim being, we've worked with Africa 50 on an interim basis. Somebody went out on maternity leave, and we slotted in a project developer for 9 months to keep the projects going. So in that way, we're accelerating progress, because otherwise it would have all stalled, right? But interim we think about that in another way. You want to hire a director of engineering, you want to hire a director of finance. That could take 9 months. There's still things that need to get done during those 9 months. And so we're talking about how to carve out pieces of work that we can give to our independent contractors to get that work done in the interim while you're hiring, so that progress can keep on moving. And if you think about, if we could reduce those gaps across the continent, you can see how much faster, we could take potentially years off, progress on the continent.
Got you. So then you have the talent, and now you have the clients. The question is, how do you match the two, right? So maybe I'll start with you, given you've built a number of these marketplaces. We know there's always whether it's a chicken and egg, a demand and supply challenge in building these. What are some of the challenges you face in actually building this marketplace, and how have you overcome them?
It is chicken and egg. So you definitely need a funder like Mark, who has patient capital and sees the end game. You need partners like Africa 50 and Rockefeller and African Climate Foundation that have sort of been willing to who see what this utility of talent could look like in the end game, and know that the only way that we get there is by sort of taking a chance on this way of working. You need to build more capacity up front than you probably need for matching. We're investing in tech. Probably the tech solution we will have will be something we need when we do 500 projects a year, not 100. So this is what we're doing.
Okay. And Zandy, then, if you talked about how you have 6,000 professionals in your sort of pipeline so far. What's the aspiration in 2030? How big do you want to be?
Ooh, okay. So first of all, 2030 is not far. But I think 2030, if I'm envisioning a headline, it talks about how, independent talent is leading the way towards building a sustainable future on the continent. And I think that the imperative is clear, right? I think we all understand around, the climate challenges on the continent. We're also seeing more and more global capital is investing a lot in sustainability, right? So that creates an opportunity. And so we need to we are in a position where we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to leapfrog and move away from these carbon-intensive models on the continent. And a big unlock for that is really unlocking this independent workforce, right? That is not trapped by traditional hiring models that limit speed and scale, right? That is not limited by rigid job descriptions, but there's cross-sectoral sort of skills that we can apply. But ultimately, it's also creating trust in African talent, right? That's my vision for 2030, where this model of, African talent first is a general way of working, right? And what I mean by that is that's what we also do at ATP. When we're looking for talent, we use sort of concentric circles, right? Can we find somebody locally in country? Can we find somebody in the region before we tap into global expertise, right? Because we really want to build the talent here locally there, a couple of hours away. But yeah, we want to build that talent there, where when we tap in global expertise, we do so tactfully, but ensuring that there's knowledge transfer and that the skill remains here. So I guess that's my vision, where this becomes a normal sort of way of working, of leveraging independent talent.
Got you. And I see you've refrained from giving me a number. So maybe I'll try with you, Sarah, which is, what is your vision? What's your aspiration for 2030?
That we're doing thousands of projects a year, that we're really showing that Africa is leapfrogging into this future of work model by really embracing and leaning into the idea of independent work and fixed-term projects in a way that allows us to bring to reduce these gaps of that are not from lack of capital, but lack of having the right people in the right place at the right time. I think we could have tens of thousands of people on our platform, and be working with thousands of organizations across the continent.
I love it. And maybe one question that will open it to the audience, because we're talking about it here for sort of the energy transition, but I'm just assuming this could be done across different sectors, or how you're thinking about it.
Absolutely. I think we started out with a climate focus, and we've already expanded to infrastructure, water, agriculture. We could easily bring this to healthcare, education. I think that there's no limit on, it's just people, money and time. No limit to how this model could be implemented across those sectors.
Awesome. Questions, comments from the audience? Yes, thank you, Adam.
I'm very curious as to how you think about AI in all of this, either as a solution for the matching or for the finding of people, or even as an agentic solution to play the role of actually matching organizations with AI agents as well. How are you thinking about that?
That last one is really out there. I hadn't thought about that one, but why not? No, we are keen observers of what's happening in AI. It makes total sense, and as we build this platform, AI will be a huge part of the matching both from we already use probably quite a lot of AI in our processes, and the AI that will be embedded in our platform will just allow us to do much more faster. I hadn't thought about AI bots, but that's something that we should take home and think about.
Adding it to the backlog. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah. I'm certainly thinking about AI from a business development point of view. How to really expand our reach. How to expand our reach using AI bots. Thank you so much.
When you look at the 6,000 people in your system, what do you notice about where they come from or what backgrounds they have? Do they tend to be concentrated in coming from certain kinds of institutions in terms of their backgrounds, that they worked at the development banks or things like that? Like what good things and bad things do you kind of notice? The way the pipeline needs to, or the way that the educational system or the professional pipeline needs to be upgraded to generate the kind of people you want.
Zandy, I'm sure as a good ex-consultant, you have those facts.
Yeah. So, I mean, as Sarah mentioned earlier, like our talent pool building has been largely led by our client needs, right? And so the talent that we have found has been, coffee value chain experts because somebody wanted that, a distributed renewable energy engineer because somebody wanted that, project developer because Africa 50 wanted that. And so it's very broad. So every project that we've had to date has been quite unique. And so have the stakeholders from investment firms, DFIs, project developers, renewable energy companies, foundations, right? And so what common things that we find, first of all, these are very senior professionals. Sarah mentioned this earlier, people who are strategic doers, so 10 to 20 years plus of work experience, but we also do have more and more junior consultants coming in from McKinsey's, BCG's, other MBBs, who are looking more and more to work independently. And then we're also seeing, different skill sets also appear there, whether it's more and more of a digital focus. I guess people who are that way inclined are more and more interested in this kind of model of working. But then we also find some who are sort of in between jobs, transitioning, moving from, the traditional full-time sort of workforce and starting to think about new ways of working coming in. I think the take that we're looking to get is going to help us understand this talent pool a bit better. But if I would give my view on where the challenge comes in terms of unlocking this talent, it's not necessarily from the talent side, but from the organizations, right? And I say that because tapping into this talent requires adopting a new way of thinking and really, really embracing the future of skills, the future of work. Right? Because our focus is really not on, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, not job descriptions, not pedigree, it's what can you do? Have you done it before in this exact context that I need you to have done it? And then moving from, hey, here's a JD where you're gonna manage a team, you're gonna do team building, you're gonna do all of that, but focusing on what you need to get done and having organizations trust that actually this person has done this before and can actually deliver. So that's where we find that the hurdle is like convincing organizations to take this talent on.
Got you. All right, so that's ATP. Thank you. Can we please... And so we'll broaden the lens now, right? So we've talked about talent. Let's talk about sort of partnerships, and let's talk to people who are on the ground actually making this happen, really delivering on the Africa Energy's transition. Starting with my friend, please join the CPD, Morimong, who's the COO of Africa 50. We can clap for her. Thank you very much. Andy, who I haven't seen in a long time, but Andy from CEO of Mission 300. And who, as we know, led and built Power Africa. And Steve Nichols, who's the Director of Africa Energy Futures within the Africa Climate Foundation. There we go. All right, so CPD, let's start with you. Right, let's talk, first tell us, I don't know if everybody here knows what Africa 50 does, but tell us a bit about Africa 50. And as you do that, I'd love for you to talk a bit more about some of the innovations that you've introduced to really accelerate how much you mobilize private capital for Africa's energy transition.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It is. Good to be here. And I think importantly, good to be with partners, being ATP and ACP. I think we work with them on so many different levels. So good always to be part of this ecosystem that's driving energy transition and talent, importantly. So Africa 50 is an infrastructure investor and asset manager. And we came about to meet the need that many of our governments identified, which is the lack of bankable projects on the continent. And we strategically took the decision to focus just on equity. There are lots of people providing debt, but one of the things that we came to recognize is that there's insufficient risk capital, equity risk capital, to get projects from concept to bankability. So that's really one of our primary driving strategic mandates to accelerate infrastructure development on the continent, as well as mobilize third-party capital. As Acha was saying earlier, our focus is really, the past 2 days has been talking about how do we mobilize capital? How do we mobilize private sector capital? So that's our mandate as Africa 50. We've got 33 African governments as shareholders and 4 institutional investors as shareholders, and we're always looking to expand that. Actually, innovation is always a very difficult subject to address, but I think a couple of things. When we look at project development, and I think more recently, a lot of people have been talking about blended finance. Blended finance is difficult. Blended finance is complex. It's bespoke. So, but what we decided to do is sort of say, what is it that we're trying to address? After having been in the market for about 9 years and realizing the capital that we're using is quite expensive. So how do we make it much more cost effective for something that is so risky and that takes a lot of time? And so we approached it sort of saying we could use a blended finance type structure. And we did that in a fund format. It's taken a lot of time. It's taken a lot of negotiations. And a lot of our investors on the continent are used to private equity as fund models. So now trying to tell people that this is not a private equity fund. And no, there is no secondaries market for project development rights. And so from an exit perspective, you can't say, okay, I've got these project development rights and therefore I'm going to sell them to somebody. So it's all of those nuances that have taken a lot of time to get us to scale up infrastructure funding on the continent. But there's one thing that we did with a fund that we're about to close. So before I actually close on that, that was our Alliance for Green Infrastructure Fund in Africa. Allied Climate Partners, together with Three Currents Group, are an investor in that. So we're able to bring in philanthropic capital, concessional capital, and commercial capital. We've got SEDEF that I saw earlier, who also came in as an investor, in addition to several other DFIs. Where we've been trying to focus as an institution is trying to drive African capital. So one of our first infrastructure funds that we set up, called Africa 50 Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, our strategy was Africa first, right? Contrary to, we always go out globally and try and bring in international DFIs. We were able to raise $275 million from 22 investors, 20 of which are African institutions. So a historic first for us. And what's important about this is the demonstration effect, right? If we're going to go out to global investors, they're going to turn around and say, but why are institutions not investing? And so for us, this has been really catalytic in saying, how do we drive more of this? And how do we get that ecosystem to really demonstrate that infrastructure is an investable asset class? So those are some of the ways that we're trying to drive funding and scale up funding. It's not easy, but hopefully we'll get there.
No, I love it. And very congrats on the fund. And I would love to come back to talk about how we drive more of it, because that's one example we're very proud of, but how do we get more of those? But Andy, let's go to you. You know, everybody's talking about Mission 300, right? But I love the name. Right? It's great. So I'm trying to figure, what are you going to do differently to make sure it succeeds, right? First, tell us what's it about, what's the aspiration? We've also had many initiatives where we try to, make sure more Africans have access to energy, and not all of them have succeeded, right? So What are you doing differently to make sure this one is going to be a resounding success?
Great. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Mission 300, it's the World Bank. I think everybody in this room knows what it is. I don't have to really explain it to them, all right? For those who don't, it's a World Bank, African Development Bank-led effort, African government-led effort to bring 300 million Africans access to electricity by 2030. And what's different? There's a lot that's different. It's at an unprecedented speed of what we've ever tried to do before. So Power Africa started in 2013. Between 2013 and 2024, Power Africa helped 200 million Africans get access to electricity. A lot of those were solar lanterns. So it's like, if you discounted that, it's nothing. It's impressive, but not as impressive as it could be. It's one of the reasons I got back into this game, because I feel a little bit embarrassed that we didn't do more. Now we've got 5 years to get to 300 million. And we've only achieved 30 million so far, and it's been over a year. So we've got to pick up our pace significantly. The idea is that the banks themselves are committing an unprecedented amount of concessional capital to this, between $30 and $40 million of IDA funding and other concessional capital from the African Development Bank. And even in talking with senior bank leadership last week, we were talking about the slow pace, and one of the responses was that she's told her teams that they're going to front load their IDA and not disperse it over 2 years, because this isn't about having deals that are closed by 2030. It's about making sure that lights are actually on and jobs are created. Like, we're not going to be happy if we don't see this trajectory pick up. The other thing that's different is, I compare it to Power Africa, where my role was to coordinate 12 U.S. government agencies, a bunch of partners. I had a huge coordinator's office, things like that. In this case, you've got 5 entities. You've got the World Bank, African Development Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, SE for All, and the Global Energy Alliance, literally working as one team. Every single day, it's multiple conversations, emails, troubleshooting, and that has pros and it has cons. The first year was a lot of, people trying to define their territory. Why are you having that conversation? That relationship is with us. That's done. So we have Andrew over here who's taking pictures. He runs something called the Technical Assistance Task. I asked him to take the pictures. He runs something called the Technical Assistance Task Force that we're on the phone and on calls with people from all 5 institutions, literally every week, figuring out, all right, what's needed to staff up these delivery units that we're creating, who's putting the money in. And it got to the point a few months ago, and I said, guys, the summit happened in January, and not a single one of these delivery units has been set up. Can we all just agree that no one's going to get mad if someone from SE for All or Rockefeller reaches out to a minister and says, that's my relationship? We just need to get these things set up already. And everyone's like, yeah, no problem. So all of that sensitivity has gone away. It's now trying to figure out who can do what as quickly as possible to make things happen. And that's huge, and that's groundbreaking. But it's still a lot of coordination and a lot of sensitivity, and that's sort of a little bit of what my role is to be the guy who doesn't really care about breaking China, which is why they brought me in a little bit. And, I was thinking about when you're asking this, what's different? I'm like, a lot of people think of me as one of the most impatient people around. And I am impatient in a lot of ways, but it's for the right reasons. Actually, probably one of the most patient people that I know. Because I knew what I was getting myself into, and I've got to deal with all of these things that I even think of, Lisbeth and I. And this has to, we set up this fellowship program with early career African professionals in the energy sector through ODI. And I can't tell you how much pushback I got when I had this idea. ODI's been doing these types of fellowships for 60 years, and it's really inexpensive. And of course, I had to talk to Lisbeth. I'm like, hey, Lisbeth, can you call this person at the bank and tell them to support it? In the end, we did it. And it's shaping up to be amazing. We've got 15 early career African professionals, some with 10 years of experience in energy, who are getting placed in countries right now. And everyone's now how do we replicate this? How do we expand it? Same thing with our relationship with ATP. ATP is helping us staff up governments right now. And again, a lot of resistance initially. Well, why ATP? Why? I'm like, look, these guys have an incredible, incredible what they're doing, the number of people that they're recruiting. Now everyone's like, oh, we're going to be working with ATP on this as well. This is truly African-led, in terms of all the expertise that we're bringing on, and it's unprecedented in so many ways. I can go on and on, but I'll pause there.
No, but thanks. We'll definitely come back.
Can I interject and just to
Absolutely.
affirm what Andrew has said?
That I'm impatient?
I was actually going to say something different, which you lack self-awareness because you are impatient. Right? But it's around the speed. So as Africa 50, we've been engaging with the World Bank to unlock their IDA funding. And we're a bit wary as to how long will this going to take. And we're proud and very happy to announce that we've got $25 million of concessional IDA funding in record time. I mean, I think we started these conversations post the January or February DAR conference, and we can turn around and say the World Bank has done all it said it will do. So we hope the momentum continues and that speed continues. So thank you for being impatient and keep doing
Please
what you're doing.
continue being impatient, Andy. Continue being impatient. Steve, let's talk about Africa Energy's futures. Tell us a bit more about what you do and how you're contributing to the energy transition.
Sure. So Africa Energy Futures is actually a sub-program of a broader organization, Africa Climate Foundation, one of the co-hosts. And we are a strategic regranter, collecting philanthropy to key systemic interventions across Africa. We operate in we operate across Africa, but we have staff in about 10 different countries. And really what we're thinking about is the conversation about climate and development has become rather disconnected, and trying to bring those connections back together with an emphasis on making sure that we understand local context. So the socio-economics and political economy of every country is hugely different across Africa. And we tend to think about Africa as one homogeneous group, investing in Sierra Leone is the same as investing in Kenya, which of course it is not. And so trying to help make sure that the systemic interventions are really effective, and so strategically commissioning work in specific blocks that partners are able to engage more. And typically we think about supply side issues in investment. Where do we get the capital? But most of the conversations I have with people is there's plenty of capital and not enough projects. And so thinking about the demand side requires a systemic intervention, thinking about, is the policy framework enabling? Are there people who are skilled enough to develop projects? And on the skills side, just thinking it's very important to have the kinds of people at ATP are helping staff into the world, but there's also a world of skills that are not just recovering management consultants like myself, but for example, welders. So in many parts of South Africa, there are really big problems with welders. You just can't get enough to finish the plant. So just trying to kind of give that systemic view of what needs to be done. The program that I'm running, Africa Energy Futures, is trying to build what we call research hubs, on the idea that if you try to talk about energy policy in any environment without a solid base of research, you just end up in a very ideological conversation. And people's intuition about what the right answer is isn't calibrated well. So the first time you ran an inclusive collaboration energy modeling project, people are like, well, I expected more coal, your model's broken, right? And so helping people, you've got to be able to run these processes, including people, so that they can do that recalibration, right? Oh, actually the intuition is, well, coal is more expensive. What we need is a combination of peaking support and renewables. So that's really the goal, is establish these research hubs that are involving policymakers, academic institutions, think tanks, civil society, in this broader conversation about modeling, and touching base with them often, every couple of weeks, as opposed to once at the beginning and once at the end.
Gotcha. Okay. We're going to open it up, but maybe one question for each of you. CPD, you talked about speed. And yesterday at Gabi, Alain was very passionate when he talked about how we need to do things at bigger scale and faster speed, right? So my question is, what is Africa 50 doing to make sure that happens, without, of course, compromising whether it's quality, whether it's the impact of the project? But what are you all doing to really accelerate delivery? Because we know that's critical for the continent.
I think one of the key things we're doing is, when we look at project development, how it is we bring partners in and technical partners into the picture. So one of the things that we've worked on, which is actually an innovation in other markets, but not necessarily on the continent, is in a few days' time, we'll be announcing one of the first transmission ITPs, so independent power transmission transactions on the continent. It's taken us many years to get here. But what helped us accelerate that process was bring on board a partner who's done this in other markets, top global partner being Power Grid of India. So this is somebody who can come in laser focused and say, this is how you execute this type of project. We've seen many different types. And so how do we optimize the efficiencies, the lines, the latest technology? So it's being able to bring in somebody who can help de-risk as fast as possible to get it to bankability, unblock to get it to bankability. But what also I think distinguishes us a little bit more than others and differentiates us is because of our shareholders. So our ability then to engage and sort of say, this is what private sector requires in order to accelerate the implementation of this. So I think that is one key area that we look at is how is it that we can de-risk this project and make sure we can get it to financial close as soon as possible.
We can't wait for the announcement.
Can I say something about that too?
Yes.
So I had a conversation with a mini grid company last week where the person expressed frustration. Wasn't with the bank, wasn't with the World Bank or African Development Bank about slowly they work. It was actually with other financiers saying that their company almost went under because it took 2 years to do due diligence on a transaction. And these companies were small businesses over, all these things. They're all financiers. Everyone's acting like they're DFC or IFC, things like that. Yesterday, I said to the person, I was like, can AI help us out with all this stuff? So yesterday my team's going to love that I say this. I was on ChatGPT yesterday. They're calling me Mr. ChatGPT now. At least I signed up for ChatGPT 5, right? And I said, I want you to go through and do an analysis of all of DFC's due diligence requirements and IFC's due diligence requirements and do a compare and contrast and see what the differences are and then come up with checklists. And it was actually super, super useful. I was just dabbling for about 20 minutes. Now, if we can use AI to do what the DFIs and others haven't been able to do through committee for years, saying, oh, we're going to get together and we're going to harmonize our documents, we're going to do all these things. If we can actually get AI to do this for us, to actually speed things up, that'll make a huge difference. I couldn't believe how many idiotic things you have to do. And I worked at DFC for 5 years. Like, I was in Zambia last week visiting mini grids, like 100 kilowatt mini grids on a piece of land that's like smaller than my backyard. And I'm like, takes 2 years to figure out how to get financing for something this small in a completely remote community. Like, this is just completely idiotic. So we've twisted ourselves into knots to do things that should just be common sense. Like, there should just be like waivers of these types of requirements for these small projects, for things that aren't hurting anybody. That, like, okay, so maybe someone's land will get a little bit infringed on. All right, we'll deal with that. But it's like, we have just created monstrosities in terms of speed. And then all like the new financiers, they all want to be like the DFIs and make everyone jump through hoops. I got to tell you, you're hurting the companies. The companies are going to fail, and we're not going to have energy access if everyone stops, can't stop acting like, everything, the perfect being the enemy of the good of everything, because it's not perfect at all. It's actually horrible, and nothing's moving.
Love it. Steve, any thoughts on speed?
Well, just to make the point that there is an underlying institutional challenge in many of these countries. So you can only get so far, and then you run up against the problem of an institution whose job it is to solve this problem, and that institution isn't staffed. In South Africa, we have this phrase that many of the companies we call them Oscar companies because there's so many acting roles. So how do you've got to have a simultaneous focus on the things that need to get done now and the things that have to be in place to make things faster permanently, right? Otherwise, you're solving these small problems every time, and then 3 years later, you've got to solve the same problems, right? And so I think what we're trying to do is that let's use this opportunity of the scale that our two partners here are creating to understand and solve the systemic issues at the same time. So that in 3 years' time, it takes 1 year to run the project instead of 2. And in 5 years' time, it takes 6 months, right? And so that's, I think we're to keep those 2 time scales in our minds at all times.
Got you. All right, we're running out of time, but we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Anybody? Yes, please.
So this is really wonderful, by the way. We are all here because we're interested in this topic, but this is for Climate Week to have human capital and the issue of human development at the center is very new. I've worked on human development issues for a long time, and this is so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for Mark's great vision with allied talent partners and so on. So, and I also love the specificity of this conversation, but the big question about scale lingers in my mind. We talk about speed, but it's about scale. Sorry about that. We've been doing some analysis, and essentially in the energy sector by 2030, we will have a labor market churn of about 38 million people moving in and out jobs within the energy sector alone, and that's 60% of the current workforce. So going from the thousands of people that we've been talking about in this conversation to how do we actually think about this much larger picture, I think is to me a kind of question, what are the pathways to scale? And Mark was nicely mentioning that the focus has been on skilling. We've actually done some analysis with a number of organizations and come up with a new agenda around how actually could we reach scale. And so one of the issues there, and this is a question to all of you, is it's okay, training is needed, but there's also a need for recognizing existing talent that's out there and accrediting that in new ways. And there are these ideas of recognizing prior learning and giving accreditations and then putting that on platforms. So I would like to know sort of how people are thinking about this and sort of innovating the recognition of talent and then using that to match to the needs, because there's a lot of talent out there.
Exactly. And so, but I like your push around scale, because I think we spend a lot of time talking about speed, right? So we'd love to hear from each of you, right? We know that we need to scale this significantly. We know the aspirations for Mission 300, for example. What's it going to take to see, bigger scale achieved across the continent? You want to start, Andy?
Yeah, if we're talking about scale for jobs, I've had this debate with people, including Adam recently, where a lot of people say, hey, we need to make sure that we create jobs within the energy industry as part of Mission 300, other things. And I'm of the view is we need to get people and businesses electrification. That will create the jobs. If Africa can start churning out thousands of megawatts of solar a year, the demand will happen. So like when I was at DFC, we did tons of deals in India because India was rolling out like 100 megawatts of solar a week. If there's not enough demand for solar to justify the manufacturing or the assembly, then it's just not going to happen. We have to start with the electrification, and then those energy-related jobs will be created, but more importantly, all these other jobs will be created. It's not like everyone has to, like, I don't have to work in the cell phone industry in order to get a job. If we need to get everybody mobile phones, we don't have to build the mobile phone, is kind of my view on it. So let's focus on the electrification. And as you can get that demand and get African governments to commit to thousands of megawatts of new power generation and new transmission and distribution infrastructure and battery demand, then naturally the market will push manufacturing and assembly to those markets. You can't justify building a solar panel manufacturer in most of Africa right now because there just simply isn't the demand for the panels. That there's not the consistent demand like you see in other markets. And the other challenge you see in Africa is 54 countries. It's a lot easier in India where it's one country where it's so anyway.
So Andrew, while I agree with you, I think we need to look at it both ways. So I completely
As in
agree.
you disagree?
No.
I said I debate this with people all the time.
No, not at all, because he is right. I think fundamentally we need to look at electrification, right? If we're going to, everybody's been talking about beneficiation. How do you beneficiate without electricity? But I think at the same time, one needs to look at providing the ecosystems. It's all well and good to say we want to beneficiate in DRC, but who's actually going to drive that beneficiation if we don't have the skills? Steve was just talking about the fact that they don't have welders. In many countries, even just basic electricians. So trying to create those ecosystems, trying to drive vocational training. I think we've moved away, and I loved what you said around accreditation. So I think sometimes we haven't been strategic as a continent, as governments, about the types of skills that we need to develop for the future, right? And so that to me is going to have to come to play. We can't just be developing power projects in isolation without creating an ecosystem.
So electrification, ecosystem, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, just to make the point that this kind of strategic alignment is not going to come on its own. We have to kind of facilitate conversations in country about what needs to be done. And I want to be careful about the definition of capacity building. So we think about capacity building as a country's ability to develop and implement its own plan. All right, so it's not us coming in and telling them what the plan is. Where we come in from a philanthropy point of view is how do we support you making that plan? So I think that's really important. And then I'm a little bit cautious about the field of dreams approach. Like if you build it, the jobs will come. I think we have to be very strategic about the demand side for electricity. What is our industrial plan for the country, right? And I hear a lot of glib stuff. So one of the global investment houses is advising Botswana to build data centers. I'm like, it's nuts. It's like a zero jobs use of energy in a country that's already short of energy and who needs other forms of industrialization, right? Yeah, something different to that, but something along those lines, you know. And even the narrative around Africa and critical minerals. We are 10 years out from being competitive in critical minerals. And so the idea that we're creating jobs in the short term is not going to happen. And so demand for energy has to come from light and heavy manufacturing and doing agriculture differently and fixing cold value chains for food security. But we don't focus enough on that conversation, I think.
All right, we are out of time. I'm going to ask each of you one question, which is the same question I asked the previous panel. 2030 headline article about Africa's energy transition and the role your institution played to make it happen. What's the headline for you? Oh, start. Okay, Steve. Men first.
We already have this plan fixed in our head. We want to have established 20 hubs across 20 different countries in Africa, each of those hubs coordinating policymakers and researchers in this conversation around what does this green industrial and energy provision pathway look like. And then we are creating platforms for these hubs to engage with each other so that you're getting shared learning across Africa, you're sharing data, you're sharing modeling approaches, you're sharing learnings.
Love it. Andy.
So I have to deviate from the old African proverb that if you want to go far, go together, go fast, go alone. We all have to just go fast. I think the headline will be that we all went fast. We pushed one another hard to go fast. And ultimately, the countries that push themselves the hardest and that go the fastest are the ones that are going to benefit and the ones that are going to succeed. So.
Thanks. I thought you said the headline would be 300 million Africans with electricity.
Oh, that's it. That's it. 300 million Africans have access. No, I want to say 600 million Africans have access.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right.
Can I quickly give a nuance to that stat? Of the 750 million people in the world without energy access, 600 million of them are in Africa.
Yeah. There you go. CPD?
Speed, scale, and project development led by Africans, capital led by Africans, for Africa, by Africa, in partnership.
Awesome. Please join me in thanking the panel. And on that note, can I just invite Sarah to say a few closing remarks?
I'd like to thank Acha. Thank you so much. You can clap. And thank you to our panelists and ATP partners. Thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this session. I want to echo Mark's remarks from the beginning. Three Cairns is really interested in unlocking climate bottlenecks. We're interested in innovative partnerships and would be very excited to continue this conversation with you out there or in the future. Like Mark said, we're open for business. So thank you.